Hey guys, just a quick thank you to all of you amazing legends that are subscribed. I could not have done it without you. But most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and like this video. It's free and it really helps our small team out. I'm not sure what I expected when I broke up with Claudia, but I definitely didn't think it would end like this. Honestly, I thought it was a clean break. She'd be upset, sure, but I'd give her some space, and eventually we'd both move on. But Claudia, she didn't know how to handle rejection, not even a little bit. It all started the night I told her it was over. I'd been thinking about it for a while, but she'd started getting weird and possessive, texting me constantly, showing up at my place uninvited. At first, I tried to explain things calmly like, hey, I think we need some time apart, but she didn't take that well. She flipped, started crying, begging me to change my mind. It felt like I was trying to end things with a tornado. It was just too much, too fast. So I did what any rational person would do. I cut it off completely. No contact. No more late night texts. I even blocked her number, figuring that would help things die down. Big mistake. Huge mistake. At first, it was just little things. I'd come home to find eggs smeared all over my window. I thought it was some random prank, but then the next night it happened again, and the night after that. The same eggs, the same spot in the window. After the third night, I started getting paranoid. I'd check outside to see if there were any footprints or signs that someone had been there, but there was nothing. It didn't take long for me to figure out who was behind it, though. One day, I came home from work, and there was a small pile of dog poop in my mailbox. Not like a casual little dog poop either. No, this was an effort. It was wrapped in a plastic bag, then shoved into my mailbox. I didn't even know who had a dog that big in the neighborhood, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. The only person who had a reason to be so petty was Claudia. By this point, I wasn't just frustrated. I was legitimately worried. I changed my locks, installed some security cameras around the house, and made sure to always lock the windows. Still, it felt like no matter what I did, she found a way to make her presence known. I started getting pizza deliveries at my door, one after the other, like clockwork. I'd open the door, see the boxes piled up, and just know Claudia. It didn't make any sense at first. Who orders pizza for someone who doesn't want it? But that was her thing. She knew I liked pizza, so she figured if she couldn't have me, she'd at least make sure I was uncomfortable. It was like some sick game to her. The tipping point, though, the thing that made everything cross from annoying to terrifying, happened on a night I'll never forget. I'd been lying in bed, exhausted from a week of work, just trying to get some sleep. My phone had been buzzing all night, texts from random numbers, blocked calls, stuff I just ignored. I finally passed out around 2 a.m., dead to the world. Then I woke up. I don't know why or how, but something felt off. The room felt different. At first, I thought I was just dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, I saw her, Claudia, lying next to me, in my bed. My heart slammed in my chest, and for a second, I just stared at her, trying to process what was happening. I didn't even know how she'd gotten in. The back door was locked. The windows were locked. But there she was, curled up next to me like she had every right to be there. I froze. I didn't know whether to scream, to jump out of bed, or to just pretend like I was still asleep. But when she shifted slightly, I could hear her breathing. Steady, calm, almost like she was waiting for me to wake up. I snapped out of it and shot up, my head spinning. I bolted for the door, but when I tried to open it, the handle wouldn't budge. She locked it from the inside. I turned back to the bed. She was sitting up now, her eyes wide and empty like nothing was wrong. I just stood there in complete shock, feeling the sudden weight in my stomach that made me feel like I was suffocating. I knew at that moment I couldn't just stand there. I needed to get out, now. I finally managed to get the door open. I ran straight for my phone. I didn't even think about it, didn't hesitate. I called the cops. The whole time, my hands were shaking, my voice cracking as I explained everything about the eggs, the dog poop, the pizzas, and now her breaking into my house in the middle of the night. The cops arrived pretty quickly, and they found her still in my house. Apparently, she'd slipped through a small window at the back that I'd forgotten to lock. I guess she'd been planning to stay the night because she had a pillow and a blanket with her. It was one of those things that's so ridiculous, it almost doesn't seem real. Like, how far do you have to be gone in your head to think that's okay? They arrested her, and I had to give a statement. The whole process felt like a blur. I remember sitting in my living room, just completely drained, waiting for the cops to finish their work. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, like she was out there lurking somewhere, just waiting for the chance to do it all again. They told me she'd been stalking me for a while, that the pizza orders were just the tip of the iceberg. Apparently, she'd been driving past my place at odd hours trying to figure out when I'd be home, when I'd be gone. I was told she'd even asked around the neighborhood, trying to get personal details about me, where I worked, where I hung out. The cops said they'd be keeping an eye on her for a while, but they couldn't guarantee anything. The thing is, I still don't feel safe. Even now, I'm still paranoid. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable in my own home again. And every time I hear a knock at the door or a car slowed down outside, I find myself checking the security cameras just to make sure it's not her. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't called the cops that night. Maybe it was over for her. Maybe not. Either way, I've learned one thing for sure: you don't ever really know what someone is capable of until they showed you. And when they do, it's too late. So, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what happened. It feels like some messed up movie plot, but I swear to God, this was my life. A few months ago, my ex Darren, yeah, the same Darren I hadn't heard from in 10 years, just showed up at my doorstep. And not in the normal "I'm sorry for the past" way either. No, it was straight up disturbing. He didn't even care that I was married, had kids, and a whole life built with my husband, Kyle. He kept coming around, saying he was meant to be with me like nothing had changed. It was like my past suddenly came crashing into my present, and it wasn't pretty. Let me give you a little backstory first, just so you understand how crazy this whole thing was. Darren and I had been together for years. We were high school sweethearts, if you want to call it that. I thought I was in love, and I really thought he was the one. But looking back, I was just so caught up in the idea of him. He was controlling, manipulative, and made me feel like I couldn't breathe. The breakup came after a lot of drama. He started getting worse, showing up at my place unannounced, texting nonstop, making wild accusations that I was cheating when I wasn't even seeing anyone. So yeah, I ended it. Clean break, moved on. The usual. Fast forward 10 years. I'm married to Kyle, who's the complete opposite of Darren. Kyle is chill, understanding, and doesn't make everything about him. He's the kind of guy who can let me have a life outside of our relationship and not freak out about it. We have 2 kids now, a house, and everything I ever wanted in a family. I've barely thought about Darren in years, except for the occasional random memory of the mess we were. It was like Darren didn't even exist anymore. And then one day I get a message. At first, I didn't even recognize the number, but it was clear right away who it was. Darren. He said he wanted to talk, but I was busy. I was at work, running errands, doing mom things. I brushed it off like the thousands of other times people from the past try to pop back in. But this time, something felt off. He kept texting me and calling. Not normal texts, either. He was saying things like, "You know I'm still one for you. You can't deny it," or "You and Kyle aren't happy. I can make you happy again." I honestly thought it was some weird joke at first, but when I looked at the number, I knew it was him. I never responded, but I could feel my heart racing every time I saw a message pop up. I didn't want to tell Kyle at first. What was I going to say? "Oh, hey, my psycho ex is texting me out of nowhere." But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something bad. Sure enough, the next week, Darren showed up at our house. Unannounced. At our front door, I wasn't home, but Kyle was. From what Kyle told me, Darren started knocking like a maniac, demanding to talk to me. When Kyle went to the door to ask him to leave, Darren started saying all this crap about how I was wasting my life with Kyle, that I belonged with him, and that Kyle wasn't good enough for me. Of course, Kyle told him to get lost, and that's when things took a turn. Darren wouldn't leave. Kyle called me in a panic, telling me Darren was being unhinged and that he was getting way too aggressive. I told him to just call the cops, but Kyle wasn't having it. He had enough. By the time I got home, the scene was something straight out of a bad reality show. Kyle was standing at the door, Darren was yelling at him from the porch, and I could hear the anger in Kyle's voice as he said he was done with this whole thing. Darren was just standing there, his eyes wide, like he was daring Kyle to make a move. And then Kyle did make a move. He grabbed Darren by the collar, wrestled him to the ground, and held him there until the cops arrived. Darren fought back, of course. He was bigger and stronger than Kyle, but Kyle wasn't going to let him scare him away. The whole thing was a blur, but the cops eventually showed up and arrested Darren for trespassing and harassment. Kyle didn't even look shaken afterward, but I could tell something about this whole situation had really shaken him up. I don't think he ever thought my ex would come back like that. I didn't either. Darren was gone for a while after that. The cops told us they had to let him go because there wasn't enough proof to keep him locked up, but they gave him a warning. The next few weeks were quiet. I almost thought it was over, but the peace didn't last. One night, when we were getting the kids ready for bed, the doorbell rang. It was like my heart stopped beating. I didn't want to answer it, but Kyle did. When he opened the door, it was Darren again, standing there, grinning like a maniac. This time, he wasn't aggressive. He was calm, almost too calm. He just stood there and said he was waiting for me to make the right decision, to leave Kyle and come back to him. He promised everything would be perfect. At this point, I was terrified. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get rid of him once and for all. We called the cops again, and this time they weren't taking any chances. Darren was arrested, but he swore this wouldn't be the last time we'd see him. They warned us that he might try to contact us again and to keep an eye out. I could feel my whole body tense whenever the doorbell rang after that. It was like I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. I'm still not sure what was going through Darren's head during all of this. Maybe he thought time would erase the fact that he was a psycho, or maybe he really thought we'd just pick up where we left off. What I do know is that I felt violated. My life, my family, my peace, it was all shattered by someone who couldn't take no for an answer. The worst part, we don't even know where Darren is now. After his last arrest, we didn't hear from him again. I have no idea if he's been in trouble with the law or if he's just hiding out. But every time I hear someone in the driveway, I get this sick feeling in my stomach, like he's still out there somewhere watching. It's been months, but I don't think I'll ever fully feel safe again. Darren was part of my past, but he's also this haunting reminder that some people never let go. I didn't think it would go down like this. I didn't think my ex Mia would even care that much after all the time that had passed. But I guess I underestimated her. Or maybe she just had something seriously wrong with her. Either way, it was a mess, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how crazy it all got. It all started a couple of months ago when I decided to start dating again. After everything with Mia, I wasn't exactly eager to jump back into the dating pool, but a friend set me up with a girl named Anna. We had met a few times through mutual friends, but this was the first time we were going out just the two of us. I was excited but nervous at the same time. We went to a small cafe downtown, one of those cozy, trendy spots with a mix of low lighting, exposed brick walls, and indie music playing in the background. It seemed like the perfect place for a first date, Chill, relaxed, no pressure. Anna was super cool. We talked about music, our favorite movies, some random stuff, and things were going well. Honestly, it was nice to just sit there with someone who wasn't Mia, not to mention someone who didn't know about all the weird drama from my past. It was a clean slate. I wasn't expecting it to turn into some fairy tale date, but things were going smoothly and I could feel myself relaxing. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. I checked it. It was a text from Mia. I hadn't heard from her in months. At first, I thought maybe it was just one of those random, "Hey, how are you?" texts. When I opened it, I could tell something was off. She'd sent me a string of messages, all one after another. Stuff like, "I saw you," and "Who's she?" Then there was one that said, "You don't get to move on like that." I froze. I looked up from my phone, and that's when I saw her, Mia, standing by the entrance of the cafe, staring directly at me. My heart sank. I didn't even have time to react before she saw me look up. She started heading straight toward our table, her eyes locked onto me like she was on a mission. Anna hadn't noticed yet. She was still scrolling through the menu, unaware of what was coming. I couldn't get my words out fast enough to warn her. Mia didn't waste any time. She didn't even say a word. She just walked straight up to Anna and without hesitation grabbed Anna's coffee and threw it at her, right at her face. It was like something out of a bad movie, honestly. The whole cafe went silent for a second as Anna screamed, wiping the coffee off her shirt and face. I could feel the heat rise in my neck, but I was too stunned to move at first. Anna looked at me, completely caught off guard, probably wondering if I even knew who this lunatic was. Mia didn't even blink. She just stood there, watching Anna's shocked face, waiting for some kind of reaction. "Is this your new girl?" Mia finally said, her voice low and icy. Anna, still in shock, was trying to clean herself up with a napkin, but the damage was done. The coffee had splashed all over her white shirt, and the cafe staff was already heading over at help. I felt like I was going to die of embarrassment, But Mia didn't care. She was staring at me like I had personally betrayed her. It took a second for Anna to speak, but she didn't yell or anything. She just asked, "Who is she?" in a quiet voice, clearly trying to keep it together. But Mia wasn't about to make things easy. She turned to Anna, the grin on her face going from a cocky smirk to something darker. I could tell Mia was getting off on the whole situation. It was like she was trying to show that she still had some kind of power over me, that I was hers and no one could take that away. She was acting like this was some twisted game, and Anna was just a pawn in it. The thing is, Mia had always been like that. Possessive. Jealous. She couldn't stand the idea of me moving on, even though she had broken up with me. She had been the one to leave, but she never really let go. Not completely. I stood up then, finally snapping out of the shock. I had to do something. I went to apologize to Anna, but I wasn't sure how much I could say without making things worse. I didn't even know if Anna would want to be around after this. I stepped toward Mia, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mia, what the hell are you doing?" I was pissed, embarrassed, and honestly a little scared. Mia wasn't in her right mind. You could see it in her eyes. This wasn't about me or Anna. This was about her own issues, her need to control everything. Mia didn't answer me. She just turned and started walking out of the cafe, as if she hadn't just ruined everything. It took everything I had not to chase after her, but I didn't want to escalate it more. I went back to Anna, who was now looking at me like I had just dragged her into some personal horror show. I felt awful. I offered to help pay for the shirt, and I kept apologizing over and over, but I could tell Anna was already over it. She stood up, wiped some of the coffee off her face, and said she had to go. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't want to stick around either if I were her. She left without another word, and I was left standing there, my head spinning. What had just happened? Mia had always been unpredictable, but this felt different. It wasn't just her usual jealousy. It was something deeper, something more obsessive. I didn't hear from Mia for a while after that. The whole thing was so strange and unsettling, and I honestly didn't know what to do with myself. I figured it was over, just some insane outburst, and Mia would eventually get over it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time something like this would happen. Even after weeks, every time I went out or even thought about dating again, I couldn't shake that feeling. That knowing that Mia wasn't done. She had thrown her last punch, but she wasn't done with the fight. And I knew deep down that I was going to have to deal with her one way or another. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened with Pete. When we broke up, I thought it would be clean. We had been together for a couple of years, and sure, things hadn't been perfect. We fought a lot. I was always exhausted from the relationship, and eventually, I just knew it wasn't going anywhere. I ended it. Simple as that. But what came after was anything but simple. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I mean, we didn't exactly end on bad terms. There were no huge fights or screaming matches. Pete wasn't the kind of guy who would lose his temper or get violent. He just didn't seem like the type to be. Obsessed, but I was wrong. It started small, like the kind of thing you brush off. I came home one day, and there was a bouquet of roses on my doorstep. At first, I figured it was just a fluke. Maybe someone had mistaken my address, or maybe it was just a delivery mix-up. But then the flowers kept coming. Every day at the same time, a new set of flowers would show up. The guy at the florist knew my name by the third visit. It wasn't just flowers, though. After a couple of weeks, the letters started. At first, it was a simple, "I miss you," or "I'm thinking about you." But as the days went on, they got weirder. Pete would leave these notes telling me how much he needed me, how we were meant to be together, how no one could replace me. He would talk about our future, even though we hadn't even been dating for that long. It was like he had completely skipped the breakup in his mind. It was like he had built this version of us in his head that never ended. I remember feeling so uncomfortable every time I saw the flowers or read the notes. I even started throwing them away before anyone else could see. It was embarrassing. Like I was being haunted by something I couldn't explain. And then one night it happened. I was getting ready for bed, scrolling through my phone when I heard knocking at my door. It was late, way too late for anyone to just be stopping by. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to check the peephole. I knew it was Pete. I froze, not sure if I should answer or just pretend I wasn't home. But the knocking didn't stop. It went from knocking to pounding. I thought about calling the cops, but was too nervous. I wasn't sure if this was just a weird, harmless visit or if it was something worse. After a few minutes, I opened the door just a crack. And there he was, Pete, standing in the hallway, holding another bouquet of flowers, his face pale, eyes wide like he hadn't slept in days. He looked like a completely different person. I didn't even know what to say. I tried to act like I was just confused, like this was all some kind of misunderstanding, but it wasn't. I could tell the way his hands were shaking, the way his breath was coming in short bursts. I should have told him to leave. I should have slammed the door and called someone. But instead, I just stood there completely frozen. Then he started to cry. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there with his shoulders shaking and tears started rolling down his face. I'm not going to lie, I felt bad. It was hard not to feel sorry for him, even though I knew this wasn't healthy. But that's the thing about people like Pete. He wasn't violent. He wasn't mean. He just had this weird, intense neediness about him that could suck you in. It was hard to say no to him. I stepped back from the door, unsure of what to do. He followed me, just standing there at the threshold waiting. Please, he said, though I couldn't really hear him over his sobs, just give me another chance. I remember everything inside me just wanting to run away. I didn't want to be cruel, but I didn't want to lead him on either. It was like this battle in my head, trying to be nice while also trying to set boundaries. I told him we couldn't be together again, that it was over, that I was moving on. He didn't take that well. He dropped the flowers on the floor and started begging, crying harder now, asking me to take him back. His voice cracked as he told me how much he needed me, how he couldn't live without me. At that point, I was scared. He was out of control. I didn't know what he might do next. Finally, after what felt like forever, I closed the door. I heard him standing there for a while, sniffing, sobbing softly, but I couldn't open it again. I felt sick to my stomach, like I just witnessed something that wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't know if I was relieved or just completely horrified. I knew I had to end it once and for all, but part of me still felt guilty. Pete wasn't a bad person. He was just broken. After that night, things got worse. The flowers didn't stop. The letters kept coming. Sometimes he'd leave a note on my car. Other times, he'd just sit in his car outside my apartment, staring at my window. I tried changing my routine, hoping to throw him off, but it didn't matter. Pete was always there, lurking in the background like a shadow I couldn't shake. I started telling my friends about it, which felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were supportive, but honestly, they were also a little freaked out. They wanted me to call the cops, but I wasn't sure. What if I was overreacting? What if it wasn't as serious as it seemed? But then one night, it escalated again. I had just gotten home from work when I found him standing outside my door again, holding another bouquet of roses. This time, though, he wasn't crying. He was just waiting. He looked at me with this empty look in his eyes. It wasn't sad. It wasn't angry. It was like he was resigned to this thing. This weird, twisted thing that he had built in his mind. It was like he'd already decided that we would be together no matter what. I told him to leave again. This time, I didn't open the door. I yelled through the window, hoping he would hear me and understand, but he didn't. He just stood there staring at me, his face completely unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and left. And just like that, the flowers stopped. The letter stopped. The staring stopped. I never saw Pete again after that night, but I'll never forget how I felt. I'll never forget the helplessness, the fear, the guilt. It wasn't until much later that I realized just how close I had come to something much worse. Pete didn't want to move on. He didn't want me to move on. And when I finally shut the door, when I finally stood my ground, I think that's when he realized he didn't have control anymore. I still don't know what happened to him, and I'm not sure I want to. But I'll never forget the way it felt to be the one who was wanted so badly, but in the wrong way. The way it felt to be trapped in someone else's idea of a relationship. I learned that some breakups aren't just about moving on. They're about survival. I still can't fully wrap my head around what happened. I mean, the whole thing feels like some twisted version of a bad reality show. If you told me a year ago that my ex would end up marrying my mom and becoming my stepdad just to get back at me, I would have laughed it off. It sounded ridiculous, right? Like, how could someone go that far? But somehow Marcus did. And honestly, I think it messed with my head more than I realized. So let me start from the beginning. Marcus and I had been together for a couple of years. We were on and off, mostly because he was super clingy and just a bit too intense for me. I get it. Everyone has their issues, but Marcus had a way of turning everything into a drama. I tried to break up with him, and he guilt tripped me or give me this sad puppy dog look until I cave. But this time was different. I'd finally had enough, so I broke up with him for good. Clean break, no back and forth. I thought that would be the end of it. It's not like I was that invested in the relationship. Sure, we had some good times, but he was always hovering, always making everything about himself. I didn't want that kind of energy in my life anymore. But of course, Marcus wasn't going to take no for an answer. The first few days after the breakup, things were relatively normal. I didn't hear from him, which honestly was a relief. But then I started seeing weird things. He'd show up at my job, hanging around outside, acting like he was just casually passing by. I caught him a few times and it made me uncomfortable, but he didn't confront me or anything. He'd just give me this weird look, like he was testing me to see if I'd make the first move. But then one day I went home and noticed something strange. My mom had been acting a little off lately too. She'd been talking about Marcus a lot, asking me how I felt about him and whether I thought he was a good guy. It seemed like an odd thing to bring up, especially after I'd just broken up with him. I thought maybe she was just being nice, trying to make sure I wasn't feeling bad or guilty about it, but deep down, something didn't sit right with me. A few weeks went by and Marcus kept showing up in random places. One time I ran into him at the grocery store. He was shopping with my mom. They were acting all normal, laughing, talking like they'd been friends for years. It was bizarre. I mean, he wasn't even pretending like there was any tension between us. It was as if the breakup never even happened. But I couldn't figure out why he was spending so much time with my mom. Eventually, things took a darker turn. I walked into the living room one evening to find my mom and Marcus sitting on the couch together. My mom was smiling at him like he was some kind of prince, and Marcus, well, he looked smug, like he was getting some sort of satisfaction from all this. My heart started racing, and I just had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, my mom told me that she and Marcus were seeing each other. That's when the first wave of dread hit me. I remember sitting there, not knowing what to say. It felt like everything in my life was spinning out of control. How was this even happening? Why was she dating my ex? I couldn't understand it. It wasn't like they had even known each other that long, and yet here they were, acting like they were meant to be. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe she was just trying to make me jealous or get back at me for the breakup. But no, it wasn't a phase. They got more serious. They went on trips together, spent more time at each other's places. And every time I tried to bring it up with my mom, she brushed me off like I was being dramatic. She'd tell me I should be happy for her, that she deserved to find someone who made her feel special. But I wasn't happy. How could I be? It felt like betrayal, like the worst kind of betrayal. And then the shocker came. One day, when I came home from work, I found a note on the kitchen table. It was from my mom, and she told me that she and Marcus were getting married. I couldn't breathe for a second. I thought I was going to pass out. My own mother was marrying my ex. It wasn't just weird. It was sick. It felt like everything I had worked so hard to get away from was being shoved in my face. I confronted her about it, but she just shrugged and said that Marcus made her happy, that he was good for her. I tried to explain how messed up it all was, how he was just trying to get back at me by marrying her, but she wouldn't listen. It was like she was blind to it. I mean, how could she not see it? Why was she so caught up in it? And why did Marcus even want to be with her? I could feel my frustration building up, and that's when I realized something even worse. Marcus didn't just want to be with my mom. He wanted to replace me. He was using her to get back at me. The whole thing was a twisted, sick game to him, and I was just a pawn in it. Eventually, the wedding happened. I didn't go. I couldn't. I couldn't watch my mom marry the guy who was supposed to be my past, my ex. It felt like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. It felt like my whole family had been flipped upside down, like I was living in someone else's life. The worst part of all of it wasn't just the marriage, though. It was the way Marcus started acting like he was the authority in my life. I couldn't go over to my mom's house without him being there. I couldn't have a normal conversation with her without him making some weird, passive-aggressive comment. It was like he was everywhere, creeping into every part of my life. He started calling me his daughter in this fake, overly sweet voice whenever he'd see me. I swear it was like he was trying to rewrite the whole damn family dynamic, making himself the center of it all. I didn't know how to handle it. I felt like I was trapped in a situation I couldn't escape. I wasn't just mad at Marcus, I was mad at my mom for letting it all happen. I mean, how could she marry the guy who was doing this just to get back at me? How could she let him take over everything? And here I am months later, still trying to figure out how I ended up in this nightmare. Marcus is my stepdad now. Every time I have to see him, it feels like I'm reliving the worst part of my life. He doesn't just play the role of a father figure. He makes sure I know who's in charge now. And it's not me, it's him. I can't escape him, and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to fix this mess. The whole thing is so messed up that sometimes I just wake up and wonder if I'm still dreaming. But no, this is my reality now. My ex is my stepdad. And that's a twisted, sick truth I'll have to live with forever. I never thought I'd be the kind of person with a story like this. I always figured those crazy ex tales were exaggerated. Like the kind of stuff you hear and think, okay, sure, that's a little much. But trust me when I say that when your ex steals your car and tries to run you over, you stop laughing. Let me back up a bit. I'd been with Lydia for almost a year. Things were good in the beginning. At least, that's what I told myself. She was fun, spontaneous, a little wild, but in a way that seemed exciting. But the cracks started to show. She was unpredictable and not in the cool way. More like in the I'm going to throw a fit if you don't agree with me way. I won't lie, there were times I stayed in the relationship longer than I should have because I was afraid of what might happen if I ended it. Lydia had this way of making you feel guilty for breathing sometimes, and I didn't want to be the bad guy, so I stuck it out. It was clear that the breakup was coming. We weren't working anymore. I felt suffocated and like I was walking my eggshells around her. So one night, I did what I should have done weeks earlier. I ended it. I told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed space, that we weren't right for each other. She didn't take it well. I mean, I expected her to be upset, but I didn't think she would go full on crazy. The first couple of days after the breakup were surprisingly calm. She didn't try to contact me. I thought maybe she had just accepted it and was moving on. But then things started to get weird. One afternoon, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone when I heard a car outside. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then the engine revved like it was coming toward my driveway. I peeked out the window and I saw Lydia's face through the windshield, grinning like a maniac. My heart sank. She was in my car. I didn't know how or why, but there she was, sitting in the driver's seat, looking like she owned the place. I tried to tell myself it wasn't happening. Maybe it wasn't my car. Maybe I was just imagining it. But no, there she was staring right at me with that crazy smile. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I knew I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my jacket, bolted out the door, and started running toward the driveway. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop her from doing something worse or just get my car back. I was hoping she'd snap out of it and leave, but no, she just kept grinning, revving the engine harder. When I was close enough, she slammed the pedal to the floor, and the car shot toward me like it was aiming right for me. I froze. I couldn't believe what was happening. My brain couldn't catch up to my body. I barely managed to jump to the side in time, feeling the gust of wind as the car missed me by inches. I was shaking, panicked, and pissed all at once. Lydia slammed on the brakes, and I thought for a second it was over, that she was done. But then she backed up. She wasn't done. She was coming at me again. This time, I didn't just freeze, I ran. I darted for the side of the house, barely making it behind the fence just in time. She was laughing now. It was this loud, manic laugh that echoed in my head long after the car passed by. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't even sure if I was still processing everything. But I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking. But I managed to tell them what had happened, how my ex had stolen my car and tried to run me over. It told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. But honestly, it felt like an eternity before they actually showed up. The whole time I was waiting, I could hear the engine revving again. Leah wasn't done, and I knew it. I could feel my whole body tensing up, bracing for whatever was coming next. My mind was racing. What if she came back and actually did hit me? What if she wasn't planning on stopping this time? It felt like forever before I saw the blue lights flashing down the street. When the cops finally pulled up, they didn't waste any time. They got out of the car, approached me, and immediately started asking questions. As I told them everything that had happened, I kept glancing at my car. I wasn't sure if Lydia was still inside it or if she had driven off again. But then I saw her. She was standing by the car, staring at me like she didn't even care. When the officers tried to approach her, she didn't make any move to get away. It was almost like she wanted them to arrest her. They were calm, trying to talk to her, but she wasn't having it. Leah just stared at them with that same twisted smile, like she was daring them to do something. One of the officers stepped forward and told her she was under arrest. That's when the real chaos started. Leah didn't scream or cry. She didn't even look shocked. Instead, she started shouting at me. She told me I was ruining her life, that I had no idea how much she loved me, that I didn't know how much I meant to her. But that didn't matter anymore. The cops didn't even let her finish before they handcuffed her and put her in the back of the squad car. I was just standing there trying to breathe and make sense of everything. I had never thought it would go this far. I had never thought she would steal my car, let alone try to run me over. But here we were. The cops asked me a few more questions, took my statement, and told me they'd take care of the rest. Lydia was arrested for theft and attempted assault, though I still don't know exactly what charges they ended up filing against her. I didn't stick around long enough to find out. After everything had calmed down, I just wanted to get out of there. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove off. I couldn't shake the image of her face, that manic grin as she came at me in the car. I still don't really understand why she did it, but I know that she wasn't the same person I fell for. Maybe I never really knew her at all. It's been a few months since that day, and I still get nervous every time I see a car pulling into my driveway. I don't know if Lydia will show up again, but I'm always watching, always on edge. It's one of those things you don't think will happen until it does. And when it does, you realize you'll never feel safe again. Not with her, at least. I don't think she'll ever come after me again, but I'll never forget the day my ex tried to kill me with my own car. It was the last time I ever let myself get sucked into something like that. Some people really are capable of anything. I've never been so freaked out in my life. To this day, I still get nervous when I hear someone yell in the street. Jasmine, my ex, well, she took things to a whole other level after we broke up. I honestly never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am trying to process what happened. So, here's the deal. Jasmine and I were together for about 8 months. It was one of those whirlwind relationships. At first, everything was cool. We'd laugh, do fun stuff together, and honestly, it felt like we were pretty good for each other. But like most relationships, it started to show signs of going south. Looking back, I can see how things weren't healthy, but when you're in it, you don't always notice. Jasmine was intense, She'd get super jealous over little things, always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. At first, I thought it was cute, but after a while, it just felt exhausting. She'd accuse me of stuff I wasn't doing, always wanting more of my time and attention than I was comfortable giving. Eventually, I realized I was just trying to keep the peace instead of actually enjoying my time with her. So, I did what I thought was the right thing and broke up with her. We were sitting in her apartment, and I told her I just couldn't keep going like this. I was burned out and I needed space. She cried, of course, and begged me to stay, but it was clear to me that the relationship wasn't healthy anymore, and I wasn't about to let it drag on. I thought it would be a clean break. No drama, no weirdness. I thought it would just be like, okay, we're done, and now we move on. Big mistake. The first couple of days after the breakup were pretty calm. She didn't text me or call. I figured she was processing it, giving me space. I was relieved, honestly. It felt like I could breathe again. But then, one morning, I got a call from my friend Ben. He was freaking out, asking if I was okay. I had no idea what he was talking about. He told me to check the local news. I got on the website, and the headline made my stomach drop. Woman running wild in the streets blames ex for breakdown. I stared at it, thinking, that can't be her. But then I clicked the article, and there she was, Jasmine, running around in the middle of the street, half naked, screaming at people. It was like something out of a horror movie, only I knew it was real. She was in her underwear, her hair a mess, shouting random stuff at strangers. The article mentioned that people had tried to calm her down, but she just kept yelling, and at one point, she even blocked traffic. The police had been called, but by the time they showed up, she had already run off down the street. It was clear she wasn't in a good state of mind. My heart dropped. I didn't know what was going on, but I could guess that she was taking the breakup pretty hard. What I didn't expect was that she was literally blaming me for everything. In the article, she said that I had destroyed her life, and that was the reason she was in this mental breakdown. And that was just the beginning. Over the next couple of days, it got worse. I started getting messages from random people I didn't know, friends of hers, I guess, telling me how evil I was for breaking her heart. I had a couple of people message me calling me a heartless jerk, and I started getting these weird, panicked texts from my own friends. Apparently, Jasmine had been running around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, telling anyone who listened how I ruined her life. Some people even said she was showing up to their houses at 3 in the morning, just standing outside, yelling my name. That was when it started to get a little unsettling. It was like she wasn't just sad or heartbroken, she was obsessed. She was latching onto this idea that I had completely wrecked her, and she couldn't let go of it. One night, I was sitting at home, just trying to forget about everything, when I heard a loud bang on my door. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late. When I went to the door, I saw Jasmine, standing there, shaking, looking completely out of it. She was still in her underwear, but this time she had a jacket on, and her hair was messy, like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching her through the peephole. She was muttering to herself, pacing back and forth. I was terrified. I didn't know what she was going to do, but I had a bad feeling. I didn't want to get involved in whatever was happening with her, but at the same time, I didn't know how to deal with it. I called my best friend Alex to let them know what was happening. By the time I was talking to Alex, Jasmine had stopped pacing and was now just standing there, staring at my door like she was waiting for something to happen. I could hear her whispering my name over and over. That was enough for me to panic. I didn't want to deal with her right now, not in this state, so I called the police. I didn't know what else to do. Within minutes, the police showed up. I felt a little relieved that someone else was there, but at the same time, I felt horrible. Jasmine wasn't getting any better. She was getting worse, and I wasn't sure what would happen next. The officers went up to her, and it was clear right away that she was in no condition to be outside like that. They tried to talk to her, but she wasn't having it. She kept saying that I had ruined her, that I was the cause of everything that had gone wrong in her life. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges, but honestly, I was too freaked out to even think straight. I just wanted her to go away to get the help she needed. They ended up taking her to the station for her safety. From what I heard later, she was taken to a psychiatric facility to get checked out. I don't know what happened to her after that. I don't know if she ever got the help she needed, but I know that it changed everything for me. That whole situation left me feeling paranoid and confused. I'd never expected things to go that far. It was just a breakup, not a freaking disaster. But somehow, Jasmine couldn't see it that way. She couldn't let go, and it spiraled into something I still can't fully understand. So yeah, that's the story. My ex went completely nuts after we broke up. Ran through the streets in her underwear, screaming at people, blaming me for everything. I didn't want any part of it, but it felt like it followed me wherever I went for a while. It was one of those times in life where you just wish you could wake up and have it all be a bad dream. So I thought I'd seen it all. But then my ex-Mason showed me exactly how far someone can go when they can't accept a breakup. It wasn't like he was a crazy person to start with, but damn, did he turn into something I couldn't recognize. What happened after we split still gives me chills, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Let me set the stage. Mason and I had been together for almost 2 years, and like most relationships, we started out strong. He was funny, charming, and seemed to care about me in a way that felt genuine. But as time went on, things started to feel off. It wasn't anything major at first, just little things. He'd get possessive over dumb stuff, like who I was hanging out with or where I was going. And when I didn't check in enough, he'd get upset. Eventually, it felt like I was walking on eggshells around him. I hated it. Breaking up with him was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. I thought I could handle it, that it would be one of those clean breaks, but Mason didn't take it well, at all. It started the day after the breakup. I woke up to a string of texts from him. Nothing weird at first, just typical I miss you stuff. But then the calls started coming. At first, I ignored them, thinking he'd cool off. But no, he kept calling. Over and over. I didn't pick up, but I had this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I couldn't just ignore it forever, so I finally blocked his number. I thought that would do it. Wrong. That night, I got a knock at my door. I didn't expect anyone. And when I looked through the window, I saw Mason standing there. He was just standing there, staring at my door like he was waiting for something to happen. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence. Maybe he was just passing by. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wasn't the case. The knocking kept going, harder this time, more insistent. I didn't answer, obviously. But I could hear him outside, calling my name quietly at first, then louder. I just stood there in my living room trying to figure out what to do. Should I call the cops? She let me in and tried to talk. But no, this wasn't just some misunderstanding. He wasn't trying to talk. He was trying to convince me to come back. That night, I ended up texting one of my friends, telling them what was happening. They suggested I just call the police, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I figured if I ignored him long enough, he'd leave. Eventually he did. But this wasn't the end of it. The next day, Mason came back. I thought maybe he would have moved on, but no, he knocked again. And again, and again. It didn't stop. He was obsessed with getting me back, and it was freaking me out. At this point, I was too scared to open the door. I started keeping the lights off, hiding behind the couch, hoping he wouldn't see me through the window. But it didn't matter. Every day, without fail, Mason was there. Some days it was just the knocking. Other days, he'd leave little things on my doorstep, flowers, letters, notes written in that messy handwriting of his. He even started calling me at work trying to talk to me, asking if I would just listen to him. It wasn't just the constant knocking and the creepy gifts. It was the way he looked at me through the window like he was watching me. I started to feel like I couldn't even leave my house without looking over my shoulder. I was constantly worried he would be lurking somewhere. The worst part was that I couldn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound like I was overreacting. I didn't want to seem like the kind of person who couldn't handle a breakup. But the longer it went on, the more I realized this wasn't normal. One night, I had enough. I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I heard that familiar knock at my door. This time, I decided to confront him. I wasn't going to let him keep doing this to me. I walked over to the door, opened it just enough to see him standing there, with that same sad, pleading look on his face. He told me again that he loved me and that I was making a mistake. He promised things would change, but I didn't want to hear it. I told him to leave. He didn't leave. Instead, he stood there just staring at me. It felt like an eternity, and I could feel myself getting more and more freaked out. It wasn't just a breakup anymore. It was like I had become a prisoner in my own home. He wouldn't go away no matter how many times I told him to. The next week, Mason did something that took things to a whole new level. He found out where I worked. I don't know how he figured it out, but one morning I walked out to my car and saw him standing there. He wasn't doing anything weird, just standing there in the parking lot waiting for me. It was like he knew exactly when I'd leave for work, and he was there watching. I tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. Every day he was there. I had to start taking different routes to work, changing my schedule just to avoid him. But still, no matter what I did, he was always there. And then it happened. One night, I was at home trying to relax when I heard something that made my heart stop, the knocking again. I stood up, looked through the window, and there he was, just standing in front of my door, looking at me with that same obsessive gaze. This time, though, there was something different in his eyes. He wasn't pleading anymore. He was angry. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the cops? Should I confront him again? But I couldn't take it anymore. I was terrified. I finally decided to call my sister. She rushed over to stay with me that night, and when Mason knocked again, we called the police. It felt like a relief finally doing something about it. They showed up, but by the time they got to my place, Mason was gone. After that, I thought maybe it was finally over. But I still kept looking over my shoulder. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there watching me. I didn't know if he would ever truly leave me alone. Eventually, he did. He disappeared, and I haven't heard from him since. But the whole thing changed me. I don't trust easily anymore. I still lock my doors at night, check the windows when I'm home, and make sure no one's following me when I leave. It's been a while now, but I still can't shake the memory of Mason's obsessive behavior. The way he couldn't let go, it still makes me sick to my stomach thinking about it. So yeah, that's my story. How my ex stalked me for a month and turned my life upside down. I just hope no one else ever has to deal with something like that. This one's a bit of a mind bender, so buckle up. It started out normal. Well, as normal as a breakup can be, but then it escalated. I didn't realize how bad things were until it was way too late. I thought Julie was a little obsessed when we were dating, but after the breakup, she went into full-on stalker mode. I'm still not sure how she thought any of it was going to work, but she didn't let up. It all started about 2 months after we broke up. Julie and I were never the perfect couple, but we had a pretty decent run until it just didn't feel right anymore. She was the type of girl who didn't give up easily. I don't know if it was her stubbornness or just sheer desperation, but she couldn't take the breakup well. At first, I tried to be as respectful as possible, let her down easy, told her we were better off apart. But like most of my breakups, it wasn't as clean as I hoped it would be. At first, she respected my space, or at least I thought she did. She sent me a few texts, a few calls, trying to convince me we could work it out, but I ignored all of that. I didn't want anything more to do with her. The usual "I miss you" messages turned into "You're the love of my life," and eventually we're meant to be together. That's when I really started to feel the weight of the situation. One day, I logged into my Instagram like I normally do, and there it was, a message from someone named Emily Rose. I didn't recognize the account at first, but when I looked closer, I could see it was Julie. She had made a whole new Instagram profile to get around the block I'd put on her old one. It was a weird feeling seeing her come at me from a completely new account. I figured it was just one message. Maybe she was trying to sneak past the wall I'd put up. But then I checked my messages the next day, and there were 2 more. And the day after that, 3 more, each time from different fake profiles. They were all versions of her with different names. Emily Rose, Olivia March, Anna Dune. But I could see the same photos she'd posted, the same bio that seemed too familiar. At first, I didn't know how to handle it. I kept blocking them, and the next day, another random account would pop up, messaging me the same things. "I miss you, and we're meant to be together." It was so weird. I mean, how far was she willing to go to get me back? I heard of people doing desperate stuff, but this was next level. After the 3rd profile, I blocked her again, but she didn't stop, not by a long shot. Over the next few weeks, Julie escalated. It wasn't just Instagram anymore. She started messaging me through Facebook and Twitter, even creating a Snapchat account under some random name just to contact me. Each time I blocked her, she'd find a new way to reach me. I had to shut down some of my accounts altogether because of the constant notifications. It was like I couldn't escape her. It got even creepier when she started showing up at my work. The first time it happened, I just thought it was a weird coincidence. I didn't recognize her at first. She changed her hair color. Now it was a reddish brown, and she was wearing a hoodie with sunglasses, trying to blend in. I didn't think much of it at first, but then she started popping up more and more. It was always at odd times, right when I was about to clock out or when I was taking a break. She'd always ask the same thing: "Are you sure you don't want to try again?" Or, "I miss us." The worst part, she'd just stand there and watch me. If I looked up, she'd quickly glance away, pretending she wasn't there, but I could always feel her eyes on me. It freaked me out. I had no idea how she even knew when I was working or what shifts I was on. Every time I tried to tell her to leave, she'd just act like she didn't hear me, like she was in some sort of trance. I'm not kidding, it was as if she'd lost her mind over the whole thing. But I was done. I made it clear to her I didn't want to get back together, and at this point, I just needed space. I deleted every account she had messaged me on, blocked her from everything. I tried to go about my life, but it seemed like every corner I turned, there she was. The next few weeks were a blur of blocked accounts and increasingly bizarre messages from new profiles. Then, one evening I came home from work, and I was just exhausted. I hadn't been getting much sleep, partly because of the constant messages and partly because of the way Julie was showing up at all hours. I walked into my apartment and froze. There she was, standing in the hallway outside my door. She was wearing the same hoodie from before, her face hidden under the hood, but I knew it was her. I don't know why, but my heart started to race. I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped, like there was no escape. I immediately backed up, trying to get out of sight, but she must have heard me because she started knocking on my door, softly at first, then harder and harder. I texted my roommate to come home, but by the time he got back, Julie was gone. She didn't leave any sign she'd been there. No note, no messages, but I knew she'd been watching me. The next day I tried to shake it off, but then I found something in my mailbox. It was a letter written by hand. I opened it, and sure enough, it was from Julie. She told me how much she loved me, how she couldn't live without me, and that I had made a mistake breaking up with her. She said she was doing all of this because we were meant to be together. That was the breaking point. I decided it was time to take real action. I called the cops. It felt dramatic, but I couldn't take it anymore. Julie wasn't just some ex trying to get back together. She was crossing lines, showing up at my work, at my home. It was unhealthy, and I needed her to stop. The cops came, took the letter, took my statement, and told me they'd try to get in touch with her. That night, I got a final message from one of her fake profiles. It was simple: "You can't get rid of me that easily." I haven't heard from Julie since that night. After the police got involved, I didn't get any more messages or run into her at work. I'm still a little paranoid when I check my social media, but at least it's quiet now. Looking back, I still don't understand what exactly happened in her mind. I don't know why she couldn't let go. But I do know one thing for sure. When someone can't respect your boundaries and starts to stalk you, it's not just uncomfortable, it's downright terrifying. I don't ever want to be in that situation again. Alright, so you're probably thinking clothes. That's it. But trust me, this is one of those stories that gets weird real fast. When I broke up with Lisa, I thought it would be the end of it. She was, for the most part, normal. Well, as normal as any relationship can be. But I had no idea just how far she'd go to get my attention after we split. What started as a few weird moments spiraled into a full on nightmare. I can't even explain how unsettling it was to get used clothes from her. Let me back up a little bit. Lisa and I had been together for about a year. We weren't exactly the perfect couple, but it wasn't terrible either. It was a typical relationship, some good, some bad, but I have a feeling we were better off going our separate ways. I broke up with her one evening, keeping things civil and explaining that it just wasn't working. She didn't take it too well, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. We didn't have a big blow up or anything, just the usual post breakup awkwardness. The first sign something was off came a couple of days later. I went to check my mail and found a package waiting for me on my doorstep. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just something random, maybe an online order I forgot about. I brought it inside and opened it. Inside the box was a pair of Lisa's old jeans, the kind she always wore when she wanted to look cute. I thought maybe it was some kind of joke at first, or maybe she just didn't know what to do with her old stuff and figured I could use them for something. But then I noticed something strange. The jeans were worn, like really worn. She had clearly been wearing them recently, and it wasn't just the jeans. There was a hoodie and a pair of socks, all smelling faintly of her perfume. I didn't know how to react. I was kind of freaked out, but I figured she must have been emotional and didn't think it through. I didn't even know how to get rid of them, so I just threw them in the back of my closet and tried to forget about it. But it didn't end there. The next week, another package showed up, and then the week after that, another one. Each time, it was the same, her used clothes. T-shirts, sweatpants, even a couple of bras and underwear. Each item had clearly been worn multiple times. The socks always had that faint scent of her perfume, this kind of sweet, almost sickly smell that I couldn't get out of my head. I'm not even sure why she thought this was an appropriate way to win me back, but it was starting to get real weird real fast. What made it even stranger was that she was sending these things in plain brown boxes. No return address, no note, no explanation. Just clothes. The first few times I didn't know how to handle it, but after a while, I started to get really paranoid. Why was she doing this? What was her plan? It didn't seem like a normal breakup move at all. It wasn't just the physical stuff that creeped me out. Lisa's texts got weird too. I'd get these random messages saying things like, "I hope you like the shirt," or "These jeans always look so good on you." It felt like she was trying to keep some kind of connection with me, like I was supposed to respond to it all, but I just couldn't. I was done, and I didn't know how to explain that to her without making things worse. But things did get worse. A couple of weeks after the last package arrived, I got a knock at my door. I peeked through the window, and sure enough, there she was, standing there with a bag in hand. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't want to open the door, but there she was waiting for me. She stood there for what felt like forever, just staring at my door like she expected me to come out. I kept the lights off and stayed as quiet as I could, praying she'd leave. Finally, she turned around and walked off, but not before leaving another package on my doorstep. I watched through the window as she disappeared around the corner, my mind racing. When I finally opened the package, it was the weirdest thing yet. Inside, there was another one of her shirts, this one a tight black tank top she used to wear when we went out. But it wasn't just the shirt, it was stained, like it had blood on it. I don't know if it was real blood or just a weird red stain, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I stared at it for a while, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. It felt like she was losing it. I didn't even know what to do at this point. I was so freaked out that I called my best friend just to talk it through. He didn't know what to say either, but he told me I needed to call the cops if this kept up. And honestly, I was this close to doing it. It wasn't like she was physically hurting me, but sending me her used clothes, especially ones with blood stains, felt like crossing a huge line. I didn't know if she was trying to mess with my head or if she was spiraling, but I couldn't handle it anymore. The next few days, I stayed at my friend's place to avoid being alone. When I came back, I found another package waiting for me on the doorstep. But this time, something was different. It wasn't just the clothes. It was a message written in a red pen on the inside of the box. We're not done yet. That's when I lost it. I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep letting her invade my life like this. I called the cops, explained everything to them, and they came over to take a report. They said they'd do what they could, but there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat. They told me to just stay on alert and let them know if anything escalated. Honestly, I didn't hear from Lisa after that. The packages stopped, and I never saw her outside my door again. But the whole thing left me feeling off for a long time. I couldn't shake the thought of her still watching me, still trying to reach out in whatever twisted way she thought would work. It's been months now, and things have calmed down, but I still get nervous when I get an unexpected package. Every time I wonder if she's still out there, plotting some new way to get my attention. I don't know what the hell she was thinking, but I'm just glad it's over. I'll never look at package or use clothes the same way again. I don't even know how to start this, honestly. If you told me a year ago that my ex, Nadia, would cause me so much trouble even after we broke up, I would have laughed. But here I am writing this because I have no other way to process the mess she caused. I guess it all started when we broke up, and things started to spiral from there. Nadia and I were together for about 8 months. I'm not gonna lie, she was fun at first. We had our moments, but eventually I started noticing little things that rubbed me the wrong way. She'd get way too jealous when I talked to other girls, even if they were just friends. She'd constantly want to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. I tried to talk to her about it a few times, but each conversation would end with her getting upset, accusing me of not caring about her or that I was hiding something. To be honest, I didn't want to deal with that level of insecurity anymore. So I broke up with her. I thought that'd be it. I figured we'd both move on and it'd be fine. But no, Nadia didn't take it well. Like, not at all. A couple of weeks after the breakup, I was at my mom's house. I went to drop off some stuff, and when I walked in, I found my mom sitting at the kitchen table with Nadia. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I hadn't even known Nadia was coming over, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know what was going on, but I could tell from the look on my mom's face that something was up. Nadia was sitting there, and she looked, I don't know how to explain it, almost smug, like she was waiting for something. When I walked in, Nadia immediately turned to my mom and started talking about how badly I treated her. My mom just sat there listening, her face going pale as Nadia spun this entire web of lies about me. Apparently, I was emotionally abusive to her. She told my mom that I'd been controlling, that I'd yelled at her for no reason, that I'd never cared about her. She even went so far as to say that I'd been unfaithful. I stood there, frozen in the doorway. My brain was scrambling to figure out what to do because I knew this wasn't the truth at all. But Nadia had it all down. She was painting me as some villain, and I could see my mom starting to believe her. I wanted to scream to defend myself, but I didn't know what to say. My mom was the type to trust people, and Nadia was doing such a good job of playing the victim. I felt this weird mix of anger and disbelief. Why would Nadia do this? Why was she telling my mom lies about me? I never thought she'd stoop to something like this, but clearly I was wrong. It was like she wanted to make me look like the worst person ever, even though none of it was true. I tried to pull my mom aside to explain everything, but Nadia kept cutting me off. She'd act all emotional, like she was about to cry, and then shoot me these looks that just screamed, "You're not going to win this one." I could feel the walls closing in. My mom wasn't giving me a chance to say anything. She was already taking Nadia's side, looking at me with that disappointed expression I hated so much. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to figure out what to do. My phone was blowing up with messages from Nadia, and they were all the same. Manipulative, guilt-tripping messages about how I ruined everything and how I don't care about her. It got to the point where I had to block her number, but she didn't stop there. The texts were replaced by calls, and when that didn't work, she started sending me letters. She'd even show up at my work trying to catch me before I could leave. It was like I was being stalked. But the worst part, my mom was still buying into it. She'd call me up, asking why I was being so mean to Nadia. She'd tell me, "Nadia's been through a lot. Maybe you should try talking to her again." I couldn't understand it. My mom was the last person I ever thought would turn on me. She knew what kind of person Nadia was when we were together, but now it was like she was so convinced by all the lies that she didn't see the truth anymore. It wasn't just the messages or the surprise visits anymore. One night, I got home late after hanging out with some friends, and I found my mom sitting on the couch with Nadia. They were talking. Nadia was acting like everything was fine, like nothing had happened, and my mom was actually comforting her. At that point, I lost it. I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted Nadia, told her to stop lying about me, and told her to stay the hell away from my family. I told my mom everything about the texts, the calls, the stalking. I didn't hold back. I was angry, and I wasn't going to let Nadia turn my life upside down. It was messy. My mom didn't take it well. She told me I was being harsh and that I didn't know what Nadia had been through. It took me hours to convince her that Nadia was using her and me to manipulate things, but I was done. I couldn't keep dealing with Nadia's lies or my mom's denial. Finally, after a long, awkward period, my mom came to her senses. She realized that Nadia had been playing both of us. She apologized for not seeing it sooner, but it wasn't easy to get back to normal. That whole situation put a massive strain on our relationship. For weeks, things were weird between me and my mom. It was hard to look at her without feeling like she didn't fully trust me. It wasn't until Nadia dropped out of the picture completely that things started to smooth over. But even then, I couldn't forget how my mom had let herself be manipulated. It's been a while now, and things have kind of returned to normal. Nadia disappeared after a while, but I can't shake the feeling that she might come back at any moment. The whole situation was just disturbing. I never thought I'd be in a position where I had to defend myself to my own family because of a crazy ex. But life is weird like that, I guess. To this day, I keep my distance from people like Nadia. Once someone shows you who they are, you gotta believe them. As for my mom, we're still working on rebuilding trust. It's not easy, but I'm hoping things get back to where they used to be. The whole experience was one of the strangest, most unsettling chapters of my life, and I can't shake the feeling that it's not totally over yet. I thought I had finally gotten rid of Emily. I really did. Our relationship had been rocky from the start, on again, off again, and then, for the last time, off for good. I ended it after one too many toxic arguments, lies, and emotional roller coasters. I didn't want to deal with her anymore. I thought the breakup was the end of it all, but that was only the beginning of the nightmare. A month after we broke up, I started getting messages. At first, I thought it was just her, trying to reach out, maybe feeling a little lonely. I tried to ignore them, but then I noticed something weird. It wasn't just the usual "I miss you" or "I can't stop thinking about you" kind of stuff. No, this was different. The first message that really made me stop was my got one saying, "I saw you with her today. She's not good enough for you." At the time, I was seeing someone new, a girl named Sarah. She had no way of knowing anything about my new relationship. Hell, even I hadn't told Emily I was dating again. I figured it was just a coincidence, maybe someone playing a prank on me. But then the messages got worse. They started including things only Emily would know. "I saw the way you looked at Sarah when you went to that coffee shop last week. You looked so happy." And then it hit me. The messages were coming from her old phone number, the one she'd had when we were together. I didn't know how to process that. How was she sending messages? I blocked the number, hoping that would stop it, but the next day I got another one. This time, it came from an unknown number. I didn't even open it, just blocked it too. But like clockwork, every time I blocked one number, another one popped up, sending the same weird, cryptic messages. "I'm watching you. I know everything." It started to mess with my head. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was it really her? Or was it someone who had somehow gotten into her old phone? I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted peace, so I decided to go ahead and move on with my life. I stopped replying, changed my settings, tried everything I could to cut ties. But it wasn't just the messages that got to me. I started feeling paranoid. Every time I left my apartment or came back, I felt like I was being watched. I checked my rearview mirror, make sure no one was tailing me. It felt like she was everywhere, even though she wasn't. Then, one night, it all reached a boiling point. I was just sitting at home scrolling through social media, trying to relax after a long day. My phone buzzed again, but this time I saw a notification from my doorbell camera. It was late, maybe around midnight, and I thought it was probably just a stray animal or a car driving by. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I opened the app. I'll never forget what I saw. It was her, Emily, standing right in front of my door, but something wasn't right. She looked off. Her face was pale, her eyes wide open, and her mouth twisted into a weird, unsettling expression. But it wasn't her hair or the way she looked. It was something about the way she stood there. She didn't move. She just stared directly at the camera, her eyes locked onto the lens like she was looking straight at me. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring back at her. It wasn't possible. I knew it wasn't possible. She couldn't be standing there. She'd been dead for weeks. I'd been to her funeral. I had seen her body. I couldn't breathe. I checked the timestamp on the footage. It was from earlier that night. There was no way this could be real. I immediately called my best friend, Matt. I was shaking when he picked up. He told me to calm down and that it was probably just a glitch in the camera or someone messing around. But when I checked the footage again, Emily was still there. Her face still frozen, still staring directly into the lens. I rushed to the door, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I swung it open, half expecting her to be standing there, ready to confront me. But the doorstep was empty. Nothing. I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to make sense of everything. My hands were trembling and my mind was racing. Had I lost it? Was I hallucinating? But the doorbell footage was real. I could still see it in my head, her face, her expression. It was like she was trying to tell me something. The next few days were a blur. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the footage in my head over and over again. Each time I tried to push it away, something would happen. Another message from an unknown number. A strange noise outside my apartment in the middle of the night. I couldn't escape it. It felt like she was haunting me, taunting me. I even started questioning if maybe it was all just in my head. Maybe I was going crazy. But the worst part, it wasn't the messages with the ghostly footage of her standing outside. It was the feeling I had when I went to bed every night. That sense of being watched, of being followed, even though I couldn't see anything. I felt like she was always just behind me, watching from the shadows. It was like she was still there in my life, even after everything. A week later, I went back to the doorbell footage and checked for any updates. To my surprise, the video of her standing outside had been deleted. It wasn't in the cloud, it wasn't on the app. It was just gone. But the messages, they kept coming. I'm still here. You can't get rid of me. And the final one, right before the messages stopped completely. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened that night. Was it her? Was it my mind playing tricks on me? I still don't know. But whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was still there in some form. Watching. Waiting. To this day, I don't trust any of my devices. I keep the cameras turned off at night. I double check every message, every notification. And every time I hear a knock on the door, my heart skips a beat. Because deep down, I know that sometimes even death can't stop someone from coming back. I thought I was done with Claire, I really did. Breaking up with her wasn't easy. She wasn't a bad person, but she got intense. I've always been the type of guy who likes my space, and Claire, well, she didn't get that. In the beginning, things were fine. She was sweet, caring, always there for me. But then slowly, it turned. She'd show up unannounced at my place, expecting me to drop everything. If I went out with friends, she'd call, text, and even show up at the bar. It started to feel like I couldn't breathe without her suffocating me. So I did what I had to do. I broke up with her. It wasn't pretty, but I figured that was the end of it. I moved on, started hanging out with friends more, and didn't have to worry about any random knock at the door or her popping up at my work. For a while, things were peaceful. But of course, that peace didn't last long. One morning, about 2 months after we broke up, I woke up to something I didn't expect. It was early, still dark outside. I had just gotten out of the shower, ready to go for a run when I noticed a small, almost perfect little doll sitting on my doorstep. At first, I thought it was some kind of weird prank, maybe something left by a neighbor's kid. But when I bent down to look closer, I froze. The doll was me. It wasn't just a random figure, it was dressed in the exact clothes I was wearing that day. My hoodie, jeans, sneakers. Everything down to the tiniest detail. I couldn't believe it. I picked it up carefully, half expecting it to just fall apart in my hands. But it didn't. The doll was sturdy, almost too perfect. Its eyes were sewn on with unnerving precision. Its face was expressionless, yet somehow unsettling. There was a note attached written in messy handwriting, but it wasn't the message that got to me. It was the way it was written. I'm always with you. I couldn't process it. I just stood there, holding the doll, staring at the note. My mind raced back to Claire. I had stopped hearing from her, but that didn't mean she was gone. I hadn't seen her since the breakup, and I hadn't heard a word from her for over a month. I assumed she moved on, but now I wasn't so sure. I didn't know what to do. I mean, who does know how to react to something like that? So I did what I thought made the most sense. I threw it away. I put the doll in the trash, crumpled the note, and tried to forget about it. I told myself it was a weird coincidence. Maybe some creepy person had just found out about my breakup with Claire and thought it'd be funny. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a joke. The next few days were quiet. I was back to my routine, doing my best to ignore what had happened. But then, one night, it happened again. I got home from work, and there it was, another doll, sitting at the foot of my front door. This one was different, though. It wasn't me. It was a doll of her, Claire. The same creepy, unnervingly perfect kind of doll. But this time, the face was molded to look exactly like her. Same hair, same eyes. I couldn't even breathe for a second. How? How did she get a doll that looked exactly like her? I quickly grabbed it and checked the back, hoping to see something. Anything that could explain this. And there it was, another note. You're mine. You always will be. I didn't know what to think anymore. At first, I wanted to call the cops, but I didn't have any solid evidence. There was nothing that proved Claire was behind it. The way she left these dolls on my doorstep, it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't just ignore it. I didn't know how to stop her. If this was Claire, she was getting worse. I thought about blocking her number, but what if she was already using a new one? I'd heard stories of people doing weird things to get attention, but this was next level. I decided I needed to get out of my house. I booked a last-minute weekend trip to the beach, hoping to clear my head. I didn't want to deal with whatever this was, but every time I thought I could escape, something else would remind me of it. The dolls, the notes, the obsession. When I came back from my trip, I checked my doorbell camera. I wanted to know if there had been any more surprises waiting for me. The footage was there, but what I saw, it made my stomach drop. There was Claire, or what looked like Claire. It was a blurry image, but it was her standing at my doorstep in the same clothes she had worn the day we broke up. She wasn't holding anything. She was just standing there, staring directly into the camera. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, they were wide, almost as if she was waiting for something. I'd never thought much of it when I ended things with Rachel. I mean, she was sweet, but she had this clingy side that started to wear me down. At first, I just thought it was because she was sensitive, so I figured she'd get over it. I'd always been a bit of a loner, someone who liked having their own space, and Rachel seemed to have trouble understanding that. But looking back now, I wish I'd paid more attention to the signs. It started off small. She'd text me a little too often, ask how I was hanging out with friends, or mention something I'd done that I hadn't told her about. It wasn't enough to make me worried, though. I just chalked it up to her being overprotective. But when I finally decided to break up with her, I didn't expect the crazy spiral that would follow. The first time I really noticed something was off was about a week after the breakup. I'd been coming home from work, just an ordinary Tuesday evening. When I got to my front door, I saw a small brown package sitting in the welcome mat. It was unmarked, no name, no return address. Just this plain package with a rubber band wrapped around it. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe someone had the wrong address. I bent down to pick it up, feeling a little strange, but still not overly concerned. I brought it inside, opened it up, and inside it was a stack of photos. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, that maybe it was a neighbor's mail or someone's lost stuff. But when I looked at the pictures, my stomach dropped. They were pictures of me. Just me at work, walking out of the grocery store, and there was even one from when I had been at the gym the day before. The angle was weird, like someone had taken the picture without me noticing. My heart started racing and I felt a sickening jolt in my gut. How did someone get these photos? I didn't recognize the other person in them, but the more I looked, the more it hit me. There was no way these were just coincidence. My first instinct was to call the cops, but I didn't. I didn't want to overreact. Maybe it was a stalker, or maybe it was just some weird prank. But part of me knew who it was. I hadn't heard from Rachel since we broke up, but she was always the type to act like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Maybe she was trying to send a message, or maybe she just didn't want to accept it was over. I threw the photos away and tried to move on. But over the next couple of days, more packages showed up. Same thing, unmarked, no return address, and every single one was filled with more pictures of me. Different angles, different places. One was from a coffee shop, another from a bar I'd been to with some friends. Every time I opened a new package, my anxiety would spike. It felt like she was watching me, like she was always right behind me lurking. But the worst came when I got the final package. I'd never thought much of it when I ended things with Rachel. I mean, she was sweet, but she had this clingy side that started to wear me down. At first, I just thought it was because she was sensitive, so I figured she'd get over it. I'd always been a bit of a loner, someone who liked having their own space, and Rachel seemed to have trouble understanding that. But looking back now, I wish I'd paid more attention to the signs. It started off small. She'd text me a little too often, ask how I was hanging out with friends, or mention something I'd done that I hadn't told her about. It wasn't enough to make me worried, though. I just chalked it up to her being overprotective. But when I finally decided to break up with her, I didn't expect the crazy spiral that would follow. The first time I really noticed something was off was about a week after the breakup. I'd been coming home from work, just an ordinary Tuesday evening. When I got to my front door, I saw a small brown package sitting in the welcome mat. It was unmarked, no name, no return address. Just this plain package with a rubber band wrapped around it. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe someone had the wrong address. I bent down to pick it up, feeling a little strange, but still not overly concerned. I brought it inside, opened it up, and inside it was a stack of photos. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, that maybe it was a neighbor's mail or someone's lost stuff. But when I looked at the pictures, my stomach dropped. They were pictures of me. Just me at work, walking out of the grocery store, and there was even one from when I had been at the gym the day before. The angle was weird, like someone had taken the picture without me noticing. My heart started racing and I felt a sickening jolt in my gut. How did someone get these photos? I didn't recognize the other person in them, but the more I looked, the more it hit me. There was no way these were just coincidence. My first instinct was to call the cops, but I didn't. I didn't want to overreact. Maybe it was a stalker, or maybe it was just some weird prank. But part of me knew who it was. I hadn't heard from Rachel since we broke up, but she was always the type to act like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Maybe she was trying to send a message, or maybe she just didn't want to accept it was over. I threw the photos away and tried to move on. But over the next couple of days, more packages showed up. Same thing, unmarked, no return address, and every single one was filled with more pictures of me. Different angles, different places. One was from a coffee shop, another from a bar I'd been to with some friends. Every time I opened a new package, my anxiety would spike. It felt like she was watching me, like she was always right behind me lurking. But the worst came when I got the final package. It was a Saturday evening and I'd just gotten home from running errands. I opened the door to my apartment and there it was again. Another package, sitting on the mat. This time, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was like I already knew something was coming, something that would be the final piece to this puzzle. I hesitated for a second before picking it up. I could feel my heart pounding as I opened it. Inside was a small tape recorder, along with a note that simply read, "I know you miss me." I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I looked at the recorder, feeling my palms sweat, and pushed play. At first, I didn't recognize the voice. It was faint, distorted, like it was coming through a bad connection. But then I realized with horror, it was me. It was my voice, saying things I didn't remember saying. Random comments, random words. Things I had never said out loud, things I didn't even remember thinking. It was like someone had been recording my thoughts without me knowing. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't breathe. But that wasn't the worst part. Right after my voice stopped, I heard something else. It was a laugh, soft, almost like a whisper. It was Rachel's laugh. It sent a chill straight through me. I didn't know how, but somehow she had been there. It was like she had been in my life without me realizing it, lurking in the background, capturing moments I never thought anyone was watching. I felt like my mind was unraveling. How had she gotten the recordings? How had she been following me without me knowing? I looked at the recorder in my hand, and all I could think was, this isn't over. She's not done with me. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that it couldn't be Rachel. Maybe it was just some sick joke, someone playing with my head. But deep down, I knew it was her. The way the voice sounded on the tape, the laugh, I couldn't deny it. I had to do something. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I thought about calling the police, but at the same time, I was scared. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was overreacting? What could they even do? It wasn't like Rachel had physically done anything. It was just this constant feeling of being followed, of being watched. But that was enough. I couldn't take it anymore. The next day, I decided to go to her apartment. I had to talk to her. I had to confront her and tell her that I was done. Tell her that I didn't want anything more to do with her. Maybe it was a stupid idea. But the thought of her continuing to haunt me like this, it made me desperate. When I got there, I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked a few times. Nothing. I started to feel like I was going crazy, like maybe she wasn't even there. Maybe she was watching me again. I turned to leave when I saw something sticking out from under the door, a small envelope. I hesitated before picking it up, but I had to know. I opened it, and inside was a single picture. It was of me standing at the door just then, holding the envelope. I backed away, heart racing, mind spinning. How was she doing this? How was she always one step ahead of me? I turned and ran. Breaking up with Kate wasn't easy, but I had to do it. She had this weird, secretive side to her that started showing up more and more the longer we were together. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, but then I started noticing things. Small stuff. She'd get weirdly defensive about her phone, wouldn't let me near it, even when we were just chilling at home. Then there were the nights she'd disappear for hours and always have some weird excuse. When I asked her what she was up to, she just changed the subject. It didn't make sense and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The secrets were eating at me. One night, after some long thinking, I just decided enough was enough. I sat her down and told her it was over. She didn't argue. In fact, she barely said anything at all. But I could see it in her eyes. There was something there, something darker that I couldn't quite understand. I walked away feeling a little unsettled, but also relieved. I thought I was finally free of whatever mess she'd gotten me into. At first, everything was fine. I went about my life, didn't hear from her, and didn't think much about it. But then, a few weeks after we broke up, I started noticing something strange. It was subtle at first, just little marks on my skin. I thought I was just stressed or imagining it. I mean, I'd been kind of a mess after everything with Kate, but this wasn't just some stress rash. These marks, they didn't look normal. It started on my arm, just a small dark line, kind of like a scratch. I shrugged it off, but the next day I noticed another one. This time it was on my shoulder, and it looked like something was written there. I rubbed it, thinking it was dirt or something, but it didn't go away. A line started to take shape, tiny, thin, like a hand-drawn tattoo. At first, I thought I was going crazy. I hadn't gotten any new tattoos, so how the hell did these lines keep showing up? Maybe it was just some kind of weird reaction to stress, or my skin was playing tricks on me. But as the days went on, the marks started forming actual words. By the end of the week, I had a full message etched into my arm. I couldn't believe it. You can't escape me. I stood there, staring at my own arm in disbelief. The handwriting, it was Kate's. It was her handwriting. How was that even possible? I hadn't seen her in weeks, so there was no way she could have done this. But everything about the message felt too real to ignore. My skin burned when I touched it, like it had been carved into me. I ran to the bathroom, checking every inch of my body. There were more words, more marks, some on my chest, my back, even on the backs of my hands. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. There was no logical explanation for what was happening. I hadn't had any tattoos done recently. I hadn't been near any places where I could have gotten a rash, nothing. Yet these tattoos weren't just appearing. They were written in a way that felt intentional. The more I looked, the worse it got. It was like I couldn't escape it. I couldn't stop staring at the message on my arm. The words seemed to follow me like a reminder that I was trapped. As I stood there, looking at myself in the mirror, I realized something else. This wasn't just about some weird, unexplainable tattoos. It was about her. It had to be. I didn't want to admit it at first, but deep down, I knew this had to be Kate's doing. The way the writing looked, the way the tattoos appeared one after another. She'd been the only person in my life who could have made this happen. I'd never told her how much her secrecy had gotten to me, but now I felt like she was trying to get back at me. You can't escape me. She had written it so plainly, and now I couldn't stop looking at it. The next day, I checked my phone. I hadn't gotten any texts from Kate, no calls, no messages. I couldn't find any trace of her online either. It was like she had vanished off the face of the earth. But those tattoos on my skin were still there, etched into me like some kind of curse I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it. I thought maybe I was overthinking, maybe it was just a weird coincidence, but it didn't stop. Every time I looked at myself in the mirror, more tattoos appeared. It was as if she was marking me, leaving a trail of messages. Each one seemed to be a piece of something bigger, like a puzzle I couldn't solve. As the days went on, I started to feel the weight of it. I was no longer in control of my own body. It was like my skin was betraying me, showing things I couldn't erase, things I couldn't take back. I was terrified. I tried everything, scrubbing my skin, using lotions, even going to a doctor. Nothing worked. The tattoos stayed, as permanent as ever, and every time I thought they might stop, they'd show up again. More lines, more words, and all of them in Kate's handwriting. Finally, I reached out to a friend about it. I didn't tell him everything, but I showed them the tattoos. They thought I was messing with them at first, but when they saw the words for themselves, they froze. I could tell they didn't know what to say. They suggested I go to the police, but I knew there wasn't much they could do. There was no proof of Kate's involvement, just these damn tattoos. I started thinking back, trying to piece together all the weird things I'd noticed when we were together. All those times I felt like something wasn't right. The secrecy, the control. I thought I'd gotten out of it, but now it felt like Kate had gotten the last word, like she was still there watching me. Then one morning, I woke up and checked the mirror again. I hadn't slept much, and the tattoos had started fading a little. I thought maybe it was finally over, but as I looked closer, I saw a new line on my neck. It wasn't just a word, it was a symbol. A symbol I'd never seen before, but somehow I knew it was connected to her. I stepped back, panic rising in my chest. It wasn't over. I wasn't free. Not yet. I don't know what Kate did to me or how she's doing this, but I feel like I'm stuck in some kind of nightmare. I don't know if she's still out there or if she's gone, but those words still burn on my skin, and I can't escape them. I don't think I ever will. I thought breaking up with Amanda would be easy. I mean, sure, she was a little obsessive at times, but we've been on and off before, so I figured it would be just like the other times. We break up, maybe sulk for a week, and then move on. But this time, it was different. This time, Amanda didn't let go, not the way I expected. At first, I noticed a new Facebook profile. I was scrolling through my feed one evening, and there it was, her face on a new account with my name. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was some weird glitch or maybe a friend request from someone pretending to be me, trying to get some attention or something. It wasn't uncommon for people to make fake profiles for a laugh. But then the messages started. It was subtle at first. My friends started texting me, asking why I was messaging them on Facebook, saying things that didn't sound like me at all. I thought it was just a misunderstanding, so I messaged a few of them back, letting them know it wasn't me and that someone was messing around. But every time I tell someone the truth, I get a message from the fake profile right before I could explain. And the messages? They were always just a little too perfect, just a little too me. It was like Amanda had studied everything I'd ever said, everything I'd ever posted. The fake profile knew my words before I even had the chance to speak for myself. It wasn't just my friends either. My family started getting these weird messages too. Messages from me, telling them how I was still in love with Amanda and how I was sorry for everything that happened. But the worst part, Amanda's fake messages were always timed perfectly. It didn't matter what I said or how I tried to clear things up. Her profile would always message people first, using my own words to make me look crazy. She'd twist things around, making it seem like I was still obsessed with her when I wasn't. It was like she had this sick game going on, making sure everyone thought I was the one who couldn't let go. I was completely freaked out. Every time I blocked the account, it would pop up with a new one. She started messaging everyone, old friends, distant relatives, even people I barely knew. I started getting more and more messages, some from numbers I didn't recognize, some from old acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years. But all the messages were the same, apologizing for breaking up with Amanda, begging for her back, telling people how we were still together. The whole thing felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried telling people in person. I tried calling my mom, my sister, a few close friends. But no matter what I said, I always felt like I was being watched, like she was always one step ahead of me. I'd tell someone the truth, and then the fake profile would message them, making it sound like I was just losing my mind. I felt trapped in my own life. Amanda was good at this, too good. She even went so far as to create fake messages between us. I find texts from her on my phone, messages that never existed. She'd be saying things like, "I miss you so much. I can't stop thinking about you. Let's try again." And when I look back at the timestamps, I realize the messages didn't add up. They were from hours after we'd last spoken. It was like she was trying to make me doubt my own reality. I don't know how she was doing it, but I knew she had to be somehow controlling everything. She knew where I'd been, who I'd been talking to, what I was doing, and it was like she was just sitting back, enjoying the chaos she was causing. It was all starting to make sense. The secrecy she kept when we were together, the constant surveillance she put me under without me even realizing it. She had a knack for creating new identities, new profiles, new versions of me and her that I couldn't escape. It started messing with my head. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my phone buzzing with new messages from the fake accounts, or sometimes from people who'd seen them. One time, I even saw one of my friends at a post on Amanda's profile that wasn't even real. They had no idea what was happening, and it made me feel like I was losing control of everything. I started questioning if I was a crazy one. Was I being paranoid? I tried to tell myself it was just some messed up prank, some twisted game. But it wasn't. This was real, and she was out there somewhere pulling the strings. One day, I decided I had enough. I tried one last thing. I reached out to the fake account, pretending to be someone else. I messaged her, told her to stop, told her I knew it was her. For a moment, I felt a little relief. I felt like I had some kind of control again. But that feeling didn't last long. Almost immediately, I got a message back from one of my old friends asking if I was okay. They said they had just gotten a message from me saying how much I regretted everything, how much I wanted to make things right with Amanda. It hit me hard. It was like no matter what I did, no matter what I said, Amanda always had the upper hand. She had control over my past, over my relationships, and now she had control over how people saw me. It was like she was rewriting my life, piece by piece, using my own identity to erase everything I'd ever done. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a breakup anymore. I was dealing with someone who wanted to ruin me. Someone who wasn't satisfied with just having me in her life. She wanted to control me. She wanted to be me. I had to leave. I had to disappear at least for a while. I deleted all my social media accounts. I changed my number. But I still don't feel safe. Even after all of that, part of me is still waiting for that next message, that next profile to pop up and ruin everything all over again. I don't know if she'll ever stop. I don't know if I'll ever get my life back. But what I do know is this: Amanda's obsession wasn't just about love. It was about power, and she has it. Breaking up with Lily was one of those decisions that seemed so clear at the time. Things had been off for months. Her jealousy, her controlling behavior, the way she would insist on knowing every little detail of my day. I tried to brush it off as her just caring too much, but deep down, I knew it wasn't healthy. The constant pressure started to wear me down, and I finally worked up the courage to end things. I thought it would be like all the other breakups. It wasn't. At first, everything seemed normal. No calls, no messages, no weird text threats. But then little things started happening. I'd be sitting in my favorite cafe, the one I went to every Sunday, when I'd get this strange feeling like I wasn't alone. I'd look up from my laptop and see a woman across the room, her head down, but there was something about her posture that made my stomach twist. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was Lily, but when I glanced again, the person would be gone. I brushed it off at first, meaning I was just being paranoid. Then it happened again and again. It wasn't just the cafe anymore. She started showing up at all the places I like to go: restaurants, the park, even my family's gatherings. She wouldn't approach me, wouldn't say anything, but I'd always spot her standing in the distance. I started feeling like I was being hunted. I couldn't figure out how she knew where I was, but she always did. It was like she had this radar for when I was nearby, and no matter how much I tried to avoid her, there she'd be. One night, I was out with a couple of friends in a bar. We were sitting at a booth, talking and having a good time when I spotted her again. This time she was sitting by the bar, her eyes fixed on me. I quickly turned my head, trying to act like I didn't see her, but it was impossible. I could feel her stare. My skin crawled. I didn't know how she was doing it, how she was tracking me, but I had a sinking feeling that something wasn't right. Things got worse after that. I was at home one night, cleaning out some old boxes of stuff I had been meaning to donate, when I found a stack of old photos. Some were from high school, some from college. There were pictures of me and friends, family gatherings, random moments from my past. As I flipped through the photos, I felt this unsettling feeling wash over me. Some of the pictures were ones I had completely forgotten about, moments I thought were lost to time. But what made my stomach drop was the one of Lily and me at my old apartment. I hadn't seen this photo in years. I hadn't even realized Lily had kept that picture. But the thing that made my blood run cold wasn't just the fact that she had the photo. It was the other photos that were mixed in. Photos that were taken at my old house. Photos of me alone, sitting on my couch, standing in the kitchen, lying in bed. These were private moments I'd never shared with her. I never let her take photos like that, so how did she have them? I went through the stack frantically, each picture digging deeper under my skin. There were pictures from when I was living by myself before we even met. Pictures of me walking around the neighborhood, going to the grocery store, hanging out with friends. I could barely breathe as I realized she had been stalking me long before I had ever even noticed. She had been in my life, hidden in the background, capturing every moment, every step I took. I freaked out. I called my best friend, told him everything. He didn't believe me at first, thinking maybe I was just overthinking things. But when I showed him the photos, his face went pale. He asked me if I had told the cops. I hadn't. I wasn't sure if it was worth it. What if I was just imagining things? But then I started thinking about all the places she'd been showing up. How could she know where I was? How could she be so everywhere? A few days later, I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I was trying to calm my nerves, trying to pretend like nothing was wrong. I walked into the living room, and my mom was sitting on the couch, flipping through the newspaper. As soon as I sat down, she looked up at me, eyes wide. "Who's this?" she asked, holding up a picture. My stomach dropped. It was a photo of me and Lily, taken at my parents' last family gathering. I hadn't seen that picture in ages, and I certainly didn't remember her taking it. I stared at it for a second, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way Lily had been at that event, right? I mean, we'd been broken up for weeks. So why would she have this photo? I grabbed the picture out of my mom's hands and immediately felt like I was going to pass out. There in the background of the photo was Lily's face, hidden in the shadows, almost unrecognizable. She'd been at the family event, standing there in the corner watching us. I tried to play it off, but I could feel my pulse racing. I wasn't sure how to explain this to my mom. How do you explain that your ex-girlfriend is stalking you, following you, taking photos of your private life and sending them back to you like some twisted puzzle? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was stacking up too high to ignore. Lily was obsessed, and I had no idea how far she'd go to keep control over me. It felt like she was always there, lurking in the background of every moment, just waiting for me to slip up. I stopped going to my usual spots. I changed my routines, stopped hanging out with friends at the places she knew I'd be. But no matter what I did, she was always just behind me. It didn't matter how far I ran, she was there like some kind of ghost from my past, watching and waiting. In the end, I don't know what happened to Lily. I blocked her on every social media platform, changed my phone number, and even moved to a new apartment. It's been months now and I haven't heard from her, but the fear still lingers. I still wonder when she'll pop up next, what she's going to do, what other photos she's taken, what new parts of my life she's still invading. The worst part, I'll never know how much of it was real and how much of it was just her twisted mind. But I'll tell you this, breaking up with Lily was the worst decision I ever made. Not because of the breakup itself, but because it set off a chain of events that I can never undo. I broke up with Naomi. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but it was something I had to do. Things had gotten way too intense between us. She'd become possessive, always hovering, asking where I was, who I was with, even though we'd only been together for a few months. I wanted space. I wanted to breathe. At the time, it felt like the best option. What I didn't expect was the aftermath. I figured the hardest part would be her begging me to come back, sending those emotional texts that tug at your heartstrings. And sure, there were a couple of those. But what came next was so much worse. It started small, like really small. I'd wake up and notice that my favorite jacket, the one I wore every Sunday when I went to get coffee, was gone. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful. Maybe I'd left it at a friend's house or tossed it in the laundry. But then, a few days later, I couldn't find the book I had just bought. It wasn't letting me lose track of my stuff, but I brushed it off. Things happen, right? You forget. It's not like I was losing anything major. But then my keys went missing. Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe you just misplaced them, right? Maybe I left them in the car or forgot them in the kitchen, but I never forget my keys. They're the one thing I always keep in my pocket, no matter what. I checked everywhere, my coat pockets, my desk, under the couch cushions. I even retraced my steps from the last time I used them. Still nothing. It was like they just vanished into thin air. The weirdest part, I had a spare set of keys that I kept in a locked drawer. So had all my keys gone, and how had I not noticed? I thought I was going crazy, honestly. Maybe I was more forgetful than I realized, but deep down, something didn't sit right. One night, I came home from work, dead tired from a long day. When I reached the door, I noticed something immediately. My front door was unlocked. I always locked it. I'm not paranoid, but it was just a habit. Lock the door as soon as I get home, check the windows, make sure everything's secure. But tonight, nothing. I pushed the door open cautiously, trying not to panic. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't figure out what had happened. Maybe I had just been rushing out the door in the morning and forgot to lock it. Still, the fact that it was open unnerved me. I didn't think much of it at first, but that night, as I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep, the thought gnawed at me. I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to figure out what had happened. Then I remembered my doorbell camera. I'd installed it a few months ago after I got in a weird feeling about someone creeping around the neighborhood. I didn't think it would be anything serious, but now I wondered if it might give me the answers I needed. So I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and scrolled back to the footage from earlier in the evening. What I saw made my stomach drop. There she was, naively, standing in front of my door, holding my keys. She was just staring at the camera. Not like a regular glance, but this intense, almost eerie gaze, like she knew I was watching. She wasn't even trying to hide. It was like she was daring me to see her. I froze. My pulse was racing, and I could barely breathe. I kept watching the footage over and over, hoping my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, it was her. It was definitely her. But the worst part, I had never given her a copy of my keys. I hadn't let her into my apartment in over a month. So how the hell did she have them? I immediately started checking every door and window, making sure everything was locked, but the fear kept bubbling up. There was no way she could have gotten in without a key, and yet there she was, standing at my door like it was normal. She'd somehow been in my apartment. She had access to my home, to my space. And I had no idea how long this had been going on. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. I started looking at every little thing differently, every noise outside, every movement I saw in the corner of my eye. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was always close by, watching me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her, ask her how she'd gotten my keys, what the hell she was doing. But another part of me knew that wouldn't solve anything. It wasn't like we were in a relationship anymore. She wasn't someone I could just reason with. If anything, it felt like she was getting more desperate, more obsessed. So I took the only steps I knew how to: change the locks, get a stronger security system, and reach out to a couple of close friends who I trusted. I didn't want to involve the police just yet, mainly because I wasn't sure if they'd take me seriously. Could I even prove anything? Sure, I had the footage of her at my door, but would that really be enough? Then the messages started. At first, it was just random texts from unregistered numbers, cryptic, weird things that made no sense. But as the days passed, it grew more direct. I know you're scared. You can't hide from me. That kind of thing. It wasn't just the words that bothered me, it was the tone. The familiarity of it. It felt like she was in my head, like she knew my thoughts before I did. I don't know what I expected after that. I didn't want to live in constant fear, but I also knew I couldn't just pretend nothing was happening. I kept checking the footage, kept locking everything down, and still, I felt her presence, like she was waiting for the perfect moment to make her move. At this point, I don't know what to believe anymore. It feels like I'm losing my grip on reality. What's real? What's just my mind playing tricks on me? I still don't know how she got my keys, how she'd been getting into my life so easily, but one thing's for sure. I don't feel safe anymore. It's like no matter what I do, she's still out there, watching, waiting, and I can't escape her. I thought breaking up with Amanda would be easy. I mean, sure, she was a little obsessive at times, but we'd been on and off before, so I figured it would be just like the other times. We'd break up, maybe sulk for a week, and then move on. But this time, it was different. This time, Amanda didn't let go, not in the way I expected. At first, I noticed a new Facebook profile. I was scrolling through my feed one evening, and there it was, her face on a new account with my name. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was some weird glitch or maybe a friend request from someone pretending to be me, trying to get some attention or something. It wasn't uncommon for people to make fake profiles for a laugh. But then messages started. It was subtle at first. My friends started texting me, asking why I was messaging them on Facebook, saying things that didn't sound like me at all. I thought it was just a misunderstanding, so I messaged a few of them back, letting them know it wasn't me and that someone was messing around. But every time I tell someone the truth, I get a message from the fake profile right before I could explain. And the messages, they were always just a little too perfect, just a little too me. It was like Amanda had studied everything I'd ever said, everything I'd ever posted. The fake profile knew my words before I even had the chance to speak for myself. It wasn't just my friends either. My family started getting these weird messages too. Messages from me, telling them how I was still in love with Amanda and how I was sorry for everything that happened. But the worst part, Amanda's fake messages were always timed perfectly. It didn't matter what I said or how I tried to clear things up. Her profile would always message people first, using my own words to make me look crazy. She'd twist things around, making it seem like I was still obsessed with her when I wasn't. It was like she had this sick game going on, making sure everyone thought I was the one who couldn't let go. I was completely freaked out. Every time I blocked the account, it would pop up with a new one. She started messaging everyone, old friends, distant relatives, even people I barely knew. I started getting more and more messages, some from numbers I didn't recognize, some from old acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years. But all the messages were the same, apologizing for breaking up with Amanda, begging for her back, telling people how we were still together. The whole thing felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried telling people in person. I tried calling my mom, my sister, a few close friends. But no matter what I said, I always felt like I was being watched, like she was always one step ahead of me. I'd tell someone the truth, and then the fake profile would message them, making it sound like I was just losing my mind. I felt trapped in my own life. Amanda was good at this, too good. Breaking up with Mia wasn't easy. I had tried everything to make it work, but she was just too much. At first, it was all cute. She was a bit clingy, but I thought it was just how she was. But soon, the calls and texts turned from sweet to obsessive. She'd constantly check up on me, even when I told her I needed space. It felt like she was everywhere I went, and the worst part, she'd ask me where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. It was draining. I never thought Mia would be the type to stalk me after the breakup. I thought she'd cry for a bit, maybe beg me to come back, and then move on like most people do. But Mia wasn't like most people. About 3 months after we broke up, I was cleaning out the attic. I had moved some of my old things up there, stuff from when I first moved into the house. It wasn't like I was expecting to find anything unusual. I just needed to clear out some space. But as I was going through boxes of old clothes, books, and random junk, I found something that made my stomach twist. There was a crumpled note, half hidden under an old sweater. It was folded up, like it had been stuffed there in a hurry, as if someone didn't want it to be seen. At first, I thought it might be something I had written when I was younger, but as soon as I unfolded it, my heart skipped a beat. The handwriting was Mia's. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself as I read it. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a please come back message or an I miss you note like I expected. It was a list. A list of things Mia knew about me, things she had no business knowing. The first line read, "You always wake up at 7:30 a.m." It was a little unsettling, but nothing too strange. Maybe she had noticed when we were together, but then I kept reading. Wednesdays, coffee at the cafe on Elm Street. You sit by the window, left side, facing the street. I froze. I never told her I went to that cafe. It was my spot. A place where I could just relax and get away from everything. I didn't even like going there when she knew about it, but I always thought it was the one place I could be myself. Apparently, that was wrong. Fridays, the gym on Maple Avenue, you always go to the 6 p.m. spin class. My mind started racing. This wasn't just casual stuff. These were things that were part of my routine, things I didn't share with anyone. But the list didn't stop there. She kept going, describing more things about my life that only she could have known. Details about my work schedule, places I like to go for lunch, even conversations we had when we were together, intimate things that were supposed to stay between us. My skin started to crawl, and I felt like I was suffocating in my own house. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She had written down personal things, things I'd never told anyone. like how my mom was sick and how I used to have trouble with anxiety. The worst part was the last line: "You can't escape me. I'm always watching." I dropped the note. My hands were shaking, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of fear settle in my chest. Mia had been watching me. She knew everything about me, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. Was she still watching me now? I snapped out of my daze and looked around the attic. Everything seemed normal, except for the note. I quickly grabbed it and stuffed it into my pocket, but that wasn't enough to calm my nerves. I needed to check the rest of the house. I hurried downstairs, trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. I checked the locks on every door and window. Everything was locked tight, like it should be, but something felt off. I kept thinking about the note. How had she gotten into my space like that? I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no noise. It didn't make sense. But then I noticed something strange on the floor near the front door. A pair of shoes. I didn't recognize them at first, but when I bent down to get a closer look, my stomach dropped. They were Mia's. The same pair she had worn when we were together. The ones she always left by the door when she came over. I hadn't seen them in months, not since we broke up. I'd never invited her back inside after that night. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. How were her shoes here? Why were they here? I hadn't seen her in weeks, let alone invited her into my house. I scanned the room, feeling the walls close in. I checked the locks again, still locked. No way she'd have gotten in unless she had a spare key, but I had made sure to change all the locks after we broke up. I backed away from the shoes, my mind spinning. There was no way Mia could have just walked in. But then I noticed something else. Something I hadn't seen before. There was a faint smell in the air like perfume, Mia's perfume. The one she always wore, the one I could never forget. It lingered in the air, just strong enough for me to notice, but not enough to be overwhelming. I felt like I was losing my mind. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my phone, and without thinking, I called a friend. I needed someone else to be with me, someone to confirm that I wasn't just being paranoid. But when I looked back at the shoes on the floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. No one had come through the door. The only person who could have left those shoes was Mia, but she wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near me. I started to wonder if she had been in the house before, waiting for me to let my guard down. I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly checking over my shoulder, wondering if she was lurking around every corner. All I knew was that Mia wasn't finished with me yet, and I had no idea how far she was willing to go to prove that. Breaking up with Bethany had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done. She was sweet, funny, and we had a lot of good times together, but it just wasn't working. She had this habit of always wanting to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. It wasn't just normal concern anymore. It felt like control. It wasn't until I found out she'd been checking my social media even after we broke up, liking my old posts from months ago, that I realized I had to let her go. I moved out of our shared place and got a new job. Everything was going smoothly. I thought I finally moved on. But then things started getting weird. It started small, just odd little moments that made me feel like I was losing my mind. The first thing I noticed was my office keycard. I hadn't used it in months. When I first moved to my new apartment, I'd switched offices, so I didn't need it anymore. I figured I had misplaced it or thrown it away in one of the many boxes I packed when I was moving. But then one day, I walked into my kitchen, and there it was, my old office keycard, lying right on the counter like it had just been set down by someone. I stared at it for a few seconds before I picked it up. I hadn't seen it in ages. My heart started to race, but I convinced myself that maybe I was just losing track of things. Maybe I had dropped it or left it there without thinking. But then it happened again. A few days later, my keycard showed up on the counter again. I hadn't been to the office in months. I couldn't even remember the last time I used it. But there it was, sitting in the exact same spot, as if someone had placed it there for me to find. This time, I felt an unsettling chill crawl down my spine. My mind raced with possibilities. Was I losing my mind? Had I forgotten about some weird routine where I kept bringing the keycard back to the apartment? But no, I knew something was off. It wasn't until that night that things really started to spiral. I had just gotten home from a long day at my new job. I tossed my jacket onto the couch as usual and went into the kitchen to grab some dinner. As I was pulling out a can of soup, my fingers brushed against something in my jacket pocket. I pulled out the note without thinking, unfolding it as I walked back to the living room. It was a simple note scrawled in handwriting I recognized all too well. I still know where you are. I froze. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the note. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. How? How did you know where I was? I hadn't spoken to Bethany in weeks. I hadn't even thought about her that much after the breakup. I knew why I had changed my address, my job, and my routines. I was sure that I had cut all ties with her. But somehow she knew exactly where I was. My head started spinning. I looked at the note again, trying to make sense of it. I still know where you are. It wasn't just the fact that she had written it. It was the fact that she knew. She knew where I was, and somehow she had made her way into my new life. I tossed the note on the couch, trying to convince myself that it didn't mean what I thought it meant. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone had found my old address and decided to mess with me. But deep down I knew better. Bethany wasn't someone who just let go. When we were together, she would show up unannounced, send dozens of texts when I didn't respond right away. She was obsessive, but I never thought it would go this far. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning in bed, imagining her standing outside my apartment watching me. Every noise outside made me jump. Every creak in the floor made my heart race. I couldn't escape the feeling that I wasn't alone in this place. I kept picturing her face, her wide, frantic eyes, and the way she would look at me when she was desperate. I kept telling myself I was just paranoid, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But then, the next day, things got worse. I went to work trying to keep my mind off the note and the strange events. As soon as I got to my desk, I saw something familiar, a picture. It wasn't just any picture. It was a picture of me. The same one I had posted on social media a few months back, but one I'd taken when I moved into my new place. It wasn't a public photo. I'd only shared it with a handful of friends. But somehow there it was, sitting on my desk like someone had printed it out and placed it there. I felt my stomach drop. There was no way this was a coincidence. I immediately checked my phone to see if anyone had sent it to me, but there were no messages. No one else had posted it. But somehow, someone knew exactly what picture to use. And that's when it hit me. Bethany had been tracking me all this time. I hadn't changed my social media passwords after the breakup, thinking it wasn't necessary. But now the realization crashed over me like a wave. She had my passwords. She had my old pictures. She had been following me, watching me, keeping tabs on everything I did, everything I posted. The worst part, I didn't know how to stop her. I thought I had done everything right. I changed my address, my job, my phone number. I didn't respond to her messages or try to reach out. I thought that would be enough, but it wasn't. I didn't know how long she'd been watching me, how far she'd gone to keep track of my every move. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was closer than I thought, that she was somewhere out there just waiting for the right moment to pop back into my life. I couldn't escape her. Not really. I had no idea what to do. All I knew was that the nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun.